Just weeks before our wedding, my fiancé told me he regretted ever leaving his high school girlfriend for me. So I called everything off, walked away without looking back, and now he's blowing up my phone, begging for another chance after. Realizing what he lost. This is a throwaway account because my life is currently in turmoil, and I need a place to share anonymously. I'm 28F and have been with Jake, 29M, for 4 years. We got engaged 6 months ago and were set to marry next month. Invitations were sent, the venue booked, my dress hanging in the closet, and my family had already purchased plane tickets. Everything was perfect until last week, when my world completely collapsed. To provide some context, Jake and I met in college during our senior year. We were both in Professor Martinez's advanced psychology seminar, and I remembered thinking, he was incredibly smart and funny, always offering insightful comments during discussions. We started as study partners, became friends, and eventually began dating just before graduation. Jake had recently ended a very serious relationship with his high school girlfriend, Emma. They had been together for almost 6 years, throughout high school and most of college. According to Jake, they broke up because they were moving to different cities after graduation, and Emma didn't want to do long distance. He seemed heartbroken about it when we first started talking, but I figured that was normal. 6 years is a long time to be with someone, especially during those formative years. What I didn't know then, and what I'm only piecing together now, is that Jake never truly got over Emma. He just got good at hiding it. Our relationship progressed normally, or what I thought was normally. We moved to Chicago together after graduation, got our own apartment after a year, adopted a cat, and built a life together. Jake got a job at a marketing firm, and I started working at a nonprofit focused on mental health advocacy. We had our routines, our inside jokes, our shared friend group. We talked about the future constantly: marriage, kids, buying a house, growing old together. I truly believed we were building something real and lasting. Jake proposed last November during a weekend trip to Michigan. We'd gone to see the fall colors, and he proposed at a beautiful overlook while we were hiking. It was perfect, romantic, thoughtful, everything I dreamed of. He clearly put a lot of thought into it, even incorporating elements meaningful to our relationship. The ring was gorgeous, a vintage emerald cut that he said reminded him of my grandmother's ring, which I'd always admired. We immediately started planning the wedding. I was so excited, perhaps too excited. I threw myself into every detail, spending hours researching vendors, creating Pinterest boards, and scheduling tastings and appointments. Jake seemed enthusiastic too, though looking back, I realize I was doing most of the heavy lifting while he mostly went along with whatever I suggested. The guest list was one area where we had some minor disagreements. Jake had wanted to invite several people from his hometown, including some of Emma's friends who he'd stayed in touch with. I thought it was a little odd but didn't want to be the controlling fiancé who dictated his guest list. I figured they were his friends too, and it had been years since he and Emma broke up. What did I have to worry about? 2 weeks ago, Jake's best friend from high school, Ryan, got married. Jake was a groomsman, which meant he had to go back to his hometown for the bachelor party and wedding weekend. I couldn't go because I had a work conference that same weekend. We were launching a major new program, and I'd been working on it for months. I was disappointed to miss it, but Jake assured me it would be boring anyway, and that he'd probably just catch up with old friends and come home with embarrassing stories about the bachelor party. He left on a Thursday for the bachelor party weekend and wasn't supposed to return until Sunday evening. Friday night, he called me from what sounded like a noisy bar, clearly having a good time with his high school friends. He sounded happy and relaxed in a way I hadn't heard in months. Wedding planning stress had been getting to both of us. Saturday, I only heard from him through a few scattered texts. Bachelor party was wild. Everyone says hi. Ryan is freaking out about tomorrow, lol, and such. Normal groomsman behavior. Nothing that concerned me. Sunday evening came and went, with no Jake. He texted around 9:00 p.m., saying the wedding had run late, and he decided to stay another night to avoid driving home exhausted. That seemed reasonable. It's a 4-hour drive from his hometown to Chicago, and wedding days are long and tiring. Monday evening, Jake came home, and immediately I could tell something was different. He seemed distracted, distant, almost like he was seeing our apartment for the first time. He kept looking around with this weird expression, like he was comparing everything to something else. When I asked how the wedding was, he gave me the most generic responses. It was nice. Ryan looked happy. The food was good. No funny stories, no details about seeing old friends, none of the usual post-event debriefing we normally did. Over the next few days, Jake's behavior grew stranger. He was quieter than usual, spending a lot of time on his phone, and seemed to be mentally somewhere else even when we were talking. When I'd ask what was wrong, he'd insist everything was fine and that he was just tired from work, but I knew something was off. After 4 years together, you develop a sense for when your partner is hiding something. Friday night, we were supposed to have dinner with my parents, who were in town specifically to help with last-minute wedding planning. We were meeting them at a nice Italian place downtown, the same restaurant where Jake and I had our first official date 4 years earlier. My parents were excited to talk about the final guest count, go over the timeline for the wedding day, and just spend time with their future son-in-law. We were running late because Jake had been unusually indecisive about what to wear, changing his shirt 3 times and spending forever on his hair. In the car on the way to dinner, he was quiet and kept checking his phone at red lights. "Are you sure you're okay?" I asked as we pulled into the restaurant parking lot. "You've been acting weird all week." "I'm fine, Megan," he said, but he wouldn't look at me, just stressed about work stuff. Dinner started out okay. My parents were in great spirits. My mom showing us pictures of the flowers she'd ordered for the rehearsal dinner. My dad joking about his father of the bride's speech. But Jake was clearly not present. He was giving one-word answers, checking his phone under the table, and had this distant look that my parents definitely noticed. About halfway through dinner, my mom was talking about the seating arrangements when Jake's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and I saw his entire expression change. His face went pale, then flushed, and he got this look that I can only describe as longing mixed with panic. "Excuse me," he said abruptly, standing up from the table. "I need to take this call." He walked outside, leaving me sitting there with my parents, who were clearly confused and a little hurt by his behavior. I made excuses. Work emergency, stressful week, pre-wedding jitters. But I was mortified and increasingly worried that something was seriously wrong. Jake was outside for almost 15 minutes. When he came back, he looked like he'd seen a ghost. He sat down, mumbled an apology about a work crisis, and barely spoke for the rest of the meal. My parents tried to keep the conversation going, but the evening was essentially ruined. After we dropped my parents off at their hotel, I confronted Jake in the car. "What the hell was that about?" I asked. "You completely checked out during dinner with my parents. They flew here specifically to see us and help with wedding planning, and you acted like you didn't want to be there." Jake stared out the windshield for a long moment before responding. "Megan, we need to talk," he said quietly. Those 5 words that every woman dreads hearing. My stomach immediately dropped. When we got back to our apartment, Jake sat down on the couch and patted the space next to him. I remained standing, arms crossed, waiting for whatever bomb he was about to drop. "The call tonight was from Emma," he said. Emma, the high school girlfriend he supposedly hadn't spoken to in years. "She was at Ryan's wedding," he continued. "We ended up talking a lot over the weekend, like, really talking about everything. That happened between us, about our lives now, about—" He trailed off. "About what, Jake?" He looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Guilt, confusion, and something else that made my blood run cold. "About how we never should have broken up," he said quietly. The room started spinning. I sat down hard in the armchair across from him, needing distance between us. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that seeing Emma again made me realize that what we had was different. Special. We had this connection that I've never been able to replicate with anyone else." "Anyone else, including me?" I said. It wasn't a question. Jake couldn't meet my eyes. "Megan, you're amazing. You're kind and smart and beautiful, and any guy would be lucky to have you. But Emma and I, we had this epic love story. We were each other's first everything. We grew up together. We knew each other in a way that— What? That I'll never know you? That what we have isn't real?" "It's not that what we have isn't real," Jake said desperately. "It's just different. With Emma, it was like we were 2 halves of the same soul. With you, it's comfortable and stable and—" And boring, I finished. You think what we have is boring? No, that's not what I meant. I just mean that sometimes I wonder if I settled into this relationship because it was easy and safe, rather than because it was the great love of my life. The word settled hit me like a physical slap. 4 years together, engaged for 6 months, wedding invitations sent out, and he was telling me he'd settled for me. So, what happened at the wedding, Jake? Did you and Emma hook up? No, he said quickly. Nothing physical happened. We just talked. But Megan, the conversation we had, it was like no time had passed at all. We fell right back into that easy rhythm we used to have. And she told me something that I can't stop thinking about, which was, she said she regrets how we ended things. She said she was young and scared about long distance, but that she's realized over the years that what we had was once in a lifetime. She said she's never connected with anyone the way she connected with me. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to tell me he'd realized how ridiculous Emma's speech was and how much he loved our life together. Instead, he kept going. She's been thinking about reaching out to me for years, but she knew I was in a relationship and didn't want to interfere. But seeing me at the wedding, talking to me, she said it confirmed what she's always known, that we're supposed to be together. And what did you say to that? I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew. I told her about you, about our engagement, about the wedding next month. But Megan, I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel something when she said all that. I felt something I haven't felt in a long time. What about what you feel for me? I asked quietly. Jake was quiet for a long moment, and in that silence, I got my answer. I love you, he finally said. But it's different than what I felt for Emma. With you, it's mature and stable and partnership-based. With Emma, it was passionate and all-consuming. And you want that back? I said. I don't know what I want, Jake said miserably. That's the problem. I'm supposed to marry you in 4 weeks, and I'm sitting here telling you about another woman, and I hate myself for it. But I also can't stop thinking about what Emma said. What if she's right? What if we gave up on something extraordinary because we were 18 and stupid? I stood up from the chair, my legs shaky, but my mind suddenly crystal clear. Jake, I said calmly, do you want to marry me? Of course I do. We've been planning this wedding for months. That's not what I asked. Do you want to marry me? Do you want to spend the rest of your life with me? Do you love me the way you loved Emma? Jake opened his mouth to answer, then closed it, then opened it again. I thought I did, but now I'm confused. You're not confused, I said. You're just finally being honest with yourself and with me. I walked to our bedroom and started pulling my suitcase out of the closet. What are you doing? Jake asked, following me. I'm packing, I said matter-of-factly. You can have the apartment. I'll stay with my sister until I figure out what's next. Megan, wait! We can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can what? You can learn to love me the way you love Emma? You can convince yourself to settle for stable and mature when what you really want is passionate and all-consuming? I started throwing clothes into the suitcase, not bothering to fold anything. I'm calling off the wedding, I announced. Jake went white. You can't do that. Everything's already planned. Your parents just flew here. The deposits don't matter, I said. My parents will understand, and everything. Being planned doesn't mean we should go through with marrying each other when you're in love with someone else. I'm not in love with Emma anymore, Jake protested weakly. Aren't you? Because everything you just told me suggests otherwise. You lit up talking about your epic love story and your soul connection and how she's the great love of your life. You looked more alive describing your conversation with her than you've looked in months talking about our wedding. Jake sat down heavily on the bed. I'm so sorry, Megan. I never meant for this to happen. I know you didn't, I said, and I meant it. But it did happen, and now we both have to deal with the consequences. I finished packing my immediate necessities and zipped up the suitcase. What about us, Jake? He asked desperately. 4 years together, and you're just walking away? I'm not walking away from 4 years, I said. I'm walking away from a lifetime of being your second choice. I'm walking away from a marriage where you'd always be wondering what if. I'm walking away from being the person you settled for because your first choice wasn't available. I pulled my engagement ring off my finger and set it on the dresser. If Emma is really the love of your life, then you should be with her. If what you had was so special and once in a lifetime, then you owe it to yourself to find out if you can get it back. But what if I'm wrong? What if I'm throwing away something good for a fantasy? Then that's a risk you'll have to take, I said. But you can't have both, Jake. You can't marry me while wishing you were with someone else. That's not fair to either of us. I headed toward the bedroom door, then turned back. For what it's worth, I hope it works out with Emma. I hope you get your epic love story. Everyone deserves to be with someone who thinks they're the great love of their life. Jake was crying now, which somehow made this easier. At least he understood the magnitude of what was happening. I do love you, he said through his tears. I know you do, I replied, but not the way you love her. And I deserve better than that. I left that night and went to my sister Caroline's house. Caroline had never been Jake's biggest fan. She'd always said something felt off about our relationship, though she could never pinpoint what. When I showed up at her door at 11 p.m. with a suitcase and tears streaming down my face, she didn't ask questions. She just made up the guest room and opened a bottle of wine. The next morning, I called my parents and told them the wedding was off. My mother cried. My father wanted to know if he should drive to Chicago and have a conversation with Jake. And both of them kept asking if I was sure I was making the right decision. I assured them I was, though honestly, I wasn't sure of anything except that I couldn't marry someone who was in love with someone else. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, calling the venue, the caterer, the florist, the photographer, canceling everything we'd spent months planning. Some vendors were understanding and waived cancellation fees, others weren't so generous. The financial hit was significant, but I figured it was cheaper than paying for a divorce later. I also had to call friends and family to let them know. The wedding was off. These conversations were brutal. Everyone wanted details, wanted to know if there was any chance we'd work things out, wanted to play peacemaker. I developed a standard script. Jake and I realized we want different things, and we thought it was better to figure that out now rather than after we were married. Jake texted me constantly for the first week, apologizing, begging me to come home so we could talk, insisting that he'd made a huge mistake and that he wanted to work things out. I didn't respond to most of them, but finally sent one message. If you want to work things out with someone, it should be Emma. I meant what I said. You deserve to be with the person you consider the love of your life, and I deserve the same. 2 weeks after I moved out, Caroline told me she'd heard through a mutual friend that Jake had driven back to his hometown. Apparently, he'd reached out to Emma, and they were talking things through. Part of me felt vindicated. I'd been right about what he really wanted. Part of me felt devastated that he'd moved on so quickly to the woman he described as his soulmate. But the worst part was the small, masochistic part of me that kept wondering if Jake and Emma would end up together, and if they did, whether their reunion would validate everything he'd said about their epic love story. Would they get married and have the passionate, all-consuming relationship he described? Would he look back on our 4 years together as just a placeholder until he could get back to his real love? A month after our breakup, Jake showed up at Caroline's house. I was in the backyard reading when Caroline came out and told me he was at the front door asking to talk to me. My heart started racing, but I told her to let him in. Jake looked terrible. He'd lost weight, his hair was a mess, and he had dark circles under his eyes. He sat down across from me at Caroline's patio table and just stared at me for a moment. I messed up, he said finally. I messed up so badly. Megan, what happened with Emma? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. She's engaged, Jake said bitterly. Has been for 3 months? She didn't mention that little detail when she was telling me about our epic love story and how we should be together. I felt a mix of emotions, surprise, anger on Jake's behalf, and something that might have been relief. She is engaged? I repeated. To some guy she met 2 years ago. Apparently, she's been having doubts about the engagement, and seeing me at the wedding brought up all these old feelings. She thought maybe if we rekindled things, it would help her figure out what she really wanted. So you were her backup plan? I said quietly. Jake's face crumbled. Yeah, just like you thought you were mine, except she decided to stick with her first choice after all. She called me last week and said she'd realized she was just having pre-wedding jitters and that she's going through with her marriage. We sat in silence for a few minutes while I processed this information. "I'm sorry that happened to you," I said, and I meant it. "That must have been really painful." "It was," Jake admitted. "But you know what was worse? Realizing what I'd thrown away for a fantasy? Realizing that what Emma and I had was probably amazing when we were 18, but we're not 18 anymore. We're different people now, and what you and I had was real and good and you only realized that after she rejected you," I finished. Jake looked stricken. "That's not... I mean, yes, but... Jake, do you hear yourself? You threw away our relationship, our engagement, our wedding, our future together because you thought Emma was your great love, and now that she's chosen someone else, you want me back? How is that different from what Emma did to you?" "Because I really do love you," he said desperately. "I know I hurt you, and I know I handled everything terribly, but I love you, Megan. What we had was special too, just in a different way." "Different how? Comfortable and stable and mature? All the things that made it less than what you had with Emma?" Jake reached across the table and tried to take my hand, but I pulled away. I was an idiot to say those things. I was confused and caught up in nostalgia, and I said things I didn't mean. "You meant them when you said them," I replied. "And honestly, you were probably right. What we had was comfortable and stable, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's not enough for me anymore." "What do you mean?" I stood up from the table and looked down at him. "I mean that I deserve someone who thinks I'm their great love story. I deserve someone who doesn't have to convince themselves that what we have is special. I deserve someone who chooses me first, not because their first choice isn't available." "You were my first choice," Jake protested. "No, I wasn't. Emma was your first choice, and when she became available, you were ready to throw me away for her. I was your comfortable, stable second choice, and when your first choice rejected you, you came back to me." Jake started crying again. "Please, Megan, I know I don't deserve another chance, but I love you. I want to marry you. I want the life we were planning together." "The life we were planning was based on a lie," I said gently. "It was based on you convincing yourself that comfortable and stable was enough when what you really wanted was passionate and all-consuming. Well, guess what? I want passionate and all-consuming too. I want someone who looks at me the way you described looking at Emma. I want someone who thinks our connection is once in a lifetime. I can be that person for you," Jake said desperately. "No, you can't. You can try, but we both know the truth now. We both know that what we had wasn't your great love story, and I'm not willing to settle for being someone's second choice anymore." Jake sat there crying for a few more minutes while I went inside to get him some tissues. When I came back, he composed himself somewhat. "So this is really it?" he asked. 4 years together, and you won't even try to work through this." "Jake, some things can't be worked through. Some words can't be taken back. You told me you settled for our relationship. You told me Emma was the love of your life. You were ready to throw away our engagement for her. Those aren't things you say or do if you're genuinely committed to someone." "People make mistakes," he said quietly. "You're right, they do. But this wasn't a mistake. This was you being honest about your feelings for the first time in our relationship, and I'm grateful for that honesty, even though it hurt." I sat back down across from him. "Jake, I hope you find what you're looking for. I hope you find someone who makes you feel the way you thought Emma made you feel. I hope you find your epic love story. But it's not with me, and it's not fair to either of us to pretend otherwise." Jake left after that, and I haven't seen him since. That was 3 months ago. It's been a difficult few months, but also liberating in ways I didn't expect. I moved into my own apartment, started therapy, reconnected with friends I neglected during the wedding planning craziness, and began figuring out who I am outside of that relationship. The hardest part has been dealing with our mutual friends. Most of them have been supportive, but a few think I was too harsh. They think Jake made a mistake and that I should have been more forgiving. They think 4 years together earned him a second chance. But I keep coming back to what I told Jake that day. I deserve to be someone's first choice. I deserve to be with someone who doesn't have to convince themselves that what we have is special. I deserve someone who would fight for our relationship, not someone who would abandon it the moment an old flame reappeared. I've been dating a little bit. Nothing serious, just coffee dates and casual dinners. It's strange being single again after 4 years, but also exciting. I'm in no rush to get serious with anyone. I'm taking time to figure out what I really want in a partner, in a relationship. What I know for sure is that I want someone who chooses me enthusiastically. I want someone who looks at me like I'm their great love story. I want someone who would never describe our relationship as comfortable and stable because they were too busy thinking it was passionate and extraordinary. I want what Jake thought he had with Emma, and I'm not going to settle for anything less. Update. My own epic love story. It's been almost a year since I posted this, and people keep asking for updates, so here we go. Jake and I have had 0 contact since that conversation at Caroline's house. I heard through friends that he moved back to his hometown about 6 months ago. Apparently, the breakup hit him pretty hard, and he wanted a fresh start somewhere familiar. I also heard that Emma's engagement fell apart about 2 months after she rejected Jake. Apparently, her fiancé found out about her conversation with Jake at the wedding and wasn't thrilled that she'd been questioning their relationship. They tried couples counseling but ultimately called it off. I don't know if she and Jake have reconnected since then, and honestly, I don't want to know. As for me, I'm doing really well. I got a promotion at work, bought a small house with a garden, and adopted a dog named Scout. I've been in therapy this whole time, which has been incredibly helpful in processing everything that happened and figuring out what I want going forward. I'm also in a relationship now with someone I met through work. Not a coworker, but someone from a partner organization. His name is David. He's 31 and he's a social worker who specializes in trauma therapy. We've been together for 4 months, and it's completely different from what I had with Jake. David looks at me like I'm the most fascinating person he's ever met. He gets excited about planning our future together. He tells me regularly that he can't believe how lucky he is to have found me. When he talks about our relationship to friends, he uses words like incredible and amazing and exactly what I always hoped for. This is what I was missing with Jake. This feeling of being chosen, celebrated, cherished. This feeling of being someone's first choice, not their comfortable backup plan. I don't regret calling off the wedding. I don't regret walking away from Jake. I don't regret holding out for something better. Everyone deserves to be someone's great love story, and I'm finally living mine. The wedding dress is still hanging in my closet, and sometimes I look at it and feel a pang of sadness for the life I thought I was going to have. But then I think about the life I'm actually building now, and I know I made the right choice. Jake taught me what I don't want in a relationship. David is showing me what I do want.